I'm Robert Whiteley from the Windies TV, and a friend of mine, Chris, we haven't seen each other now for 3 years, but Apter introduced us, and it's wonderful to see you again, Chris.
And yourself.
You're looking very dapper, and I can, as I was saying, the atmosphere here when I walked in, it's very, very salubrious, and it's very conducive for family life and business. You must have enjoyed and still enjoying some fantastic times here.
Yeah.
I can imagine when you lay down and thinking about some business module, how brainstorming you can be. And you obviously, you have a team of people around you that each one of them have their advantages and disadvantages. And that's what you harness and bring together. I know you've got a new project, Essington Cemetery, and other cemeteries, and you're the CEO of it. Could you tell us a little bit about the background for Essington Cemetery?
Yeah, one of our aspirations as a company is to help within the crisis that's going on in the UK today, with the lack of burial space and cemetery space across the UK. So when we look for each one of our cemeteries within our business model, we always look at areas that need a cemetery and they are running out of space. So it's all done on demographics and need. So with Essington, we purchased 26 acres with the first 6 acres ready and developed, and then we'll develop phase by phase as we grow as a business moving forward. So with the Essington Cemetery, we're really excited because we look at the catchment area and the death rates within those catchment areas, that there's such a high need for what we're looking to deliver. And we're not similar to, there's no cemetery that's similar to what we build as a business. So we're a premium brand, but at the same level of costings of our competitors or other cemeteries in the location. And we also don't charge any additional costs for outside of boroughs.
This is one of the advantages of the company.
So we look at, there's two real advantages that we offer outside of the being an exclusive premium site, is the fact that we don't start our ERBs until day of interment, so where people are able to secure to
What is RAB?
ERB.
ERB.
Yeah, it's an exclusive right to burial.
Okay.
So when you purchase a grave, you have the rights of that grave.
And how long for?
That's 99 years.
And what does the council give in terms
They
of
all
that?
vary. So they all vary from the 25, 50, 75 to 99 years.
Well, it's good to know that you give 99 years.
Yeah.
And the council give from 25.
Yeah.
So you give a longer period of time.
Yeah, and so the loved ones are able to visit and not be concerned that the term is too short. And also, I think the fact that we've got the grave we're able to offer a pre-need plot. So people that are buying care plans at the funeral care plans at the moment, they haven't got a grave or an ash interment.
Sorry, what is pre-need?
So a pre-need is securing their plots today. So a lot of communities, a lot of religious groups like to be buried together as a family. So what we're able to do in our cemeteries is secure anywhere from one plot up to however many plots in the family. So it gives them their confidence that through the generations of the family, they have their plots allocated at today's price. And where you see a growth in this industry of around 10% a year, in some cases, we've just seen some press releases since 2004. There's been a raise up to 122%.
This is the pre-need.
Yeah.
And you do have a separate, I think it's Hackney?
Hackney. Our Hackneys will be working with the local funeral directors that work with families that are dealing with deceased, and also religious groups, again, that are running out of spaces in cemeteries across the Midlands. So they're able to come and be buried within the time frame that they need to be, and at no extra cost
So at need, they need it now.
today. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that cost is still the same.
The same,
It's fixed. It's
Yeah.
not going to change.
So there's a scale of pricing. So we do an intro offer to the FDs, funeral directors, and that's a private and confidential to them. And then we'll do prices from 2495, which is in line with other cemeteries within the location.
So you were looking at doing something for the Afro-West Indian community.
Yes.
Could you tell us a little bit about that area of it?
So one of our researchers has found that the West Indian community is a massive community in the Midlands, and again are either been buried in Handsworth and other cemeteries in the Midlands location, which are running out of space as we speak. But they also, in other locations within our catchment area, there's no specialist exclusivity to the site. So one of our business models, after the research that our team and planning experts have done, is we've realised that we need to offer religious sections within the cemetery. So there'll be lawned areas, there'll be a West Indian area, there'll be a Muslim area, there'll be an ash interment area. So we're able to offer to each individual religious group
Separate,
private,
yes, and beautification,
Yeah.
and everything is included in the price.
Correct.
And with management and administration as well.
Yeah, so we've one of my big one of my big roles within the CEO of this company is to recruit the right individuals in the right positions. So we've got now people that have been in the industry for many years, for all their working careers, been successful with other companies that they've worked with and exited, where they've owned and so on. And we're also recruiting individuals that have worked within the funeral care planning industry. And also the cemetery manager is one of the key and most important people within our company.
So you're looking for key people,
Yeah.
specialists and expertise
Yes.
to grow the company. If we just go back a little bit about before Essington Cemetery, because I know you've been in the business
Yeah.
quite some time. Could you tell us how long you've been in the business? And
Yeah, so
what you do?
this type of business you can't build overnight. It's a lengthy process, and you need to understand the whole process from the service element through to the demographics and requirements and planning restrictions and requirements and so on. So we've been in the industry between 6 and 7 years. We built a board of credible directors to work alongside me
I think
in the
that is
growth
very,
of the
very
business.
important in any industry to have a board of directors and things like that.
And everybody's successful within their own rights, so they've been successful with their own businesses and worked at a high level. And you'll see that by our website, and you see the individuals that we have on the board. And that's been excellent for us as a starting point. But we wasn't ready, as I previously mentioned, we wasn't ready to start building the cemetery, developing the cemetery, and putting all the processes and procedures in place until we attracted the right individuals from this sector that have been heavily successful and have been presidents of the federation and secretary of the president and so on, and
Become
managed this.
fully
Yeah.
qualified in their fields.
Yeah, and what's been really interesting is everybody that has worked in this industry that's been successful has the frustration that they're not able to offer the pre-need plots. The prices are anywhere up to 2.5 times a grave cost once you step outside the catchment area or outside the postcode. And that's one of their frustrations. Also, if they did sell a pre-need plot, the interment would start ticking on day of that sale. Where ours doesn't start until the day of interment.
That's the day the person is
Yes.
married.
Yeah.
I think that's a very sound advantage
Yeah.
in that area. And the customer care, I mean, after the person, obviously the business is done, how do you go about liaison with the individual after to give that special customer service?
So what's important for us is obviously our relationship with the funeral director, because they will deal with the whole process of funeral arrangements. But the most important relationship there and thereafter, because the family members will continue to visit their loved one. So our cemetery site manager will look after and start building relationships with the family members. And of course we can offer them then pre-need plots next to their loved ones. Because we're a virgin site at the moment,
Very embryonic.
we're able to put them all, all family members together when their time is here.
I went and had a look at the cemetery myself, just very vaguely, and my first opinion of it, it's a beautiful site. You have potential to build a chapel and things on it.
Yeah.
When do you envisage this will be done?
So we're going through the planning process at the moment for the chapel. So there's a number of detailed planning programs we have to follow to get to this in various different stages. We're now at stage where application has gone in for the chapel. We don't see any issues with having the planning application signed off, and then we'll develop a chapel on site, and again that increases up into more of a premium site and a more exclusive
Site. And just going back again a little bit, so your introductory offer that you're offering now
Yeah.
for the at needs
Yeah.
is 1800 and is it 1800?
Yeah, so we've got an introductory offer for funeral directors, and that's for us to build a relationship with them and for them to support us in the growth of Essington Cemetery, which benefits them as well as us. And Adam's out there, the guy who works for the company. He's heavily involved with working with the funeral directors, and also we have our site manager that will be doing a lot of work who already has relationships with the companies around the catchment area. We also are doing a open evening, so we're officially launching the site and opening the site, and the president of the federation will be opening the site for us, and we'll be doing a evening with the funeral directors and relevant individuals that want to work with us moving forward, and ask their opinions on what their thoughts are on what we're delivering as a cemetery, because that's very important, because there may be some requirements that we may have missed. We're human at the end of the day, and we can then start developing and that relationships from the 11th of April, which is the official opening date.
I noticed that you have a procedure, gentleman Rick,
Yeah.
who we're going to speak to later on, and he seems to be someone who has a depth of knowledge in this area. People like that are key people in your company where procedures are concerned, and it's very healthy to have people like that on board, because as you said, none of us are perfect.
Nope.
We've got to have someone to look over our shoulders and things. And I can see that the company, from the time that we've built, from the time that we met before, has moved into a different direction.
Yeah, definitely.
And you seem so more comfortable with where you are now. And in the next 5 years, how do you see this company?
So we have a business plan that will develop as multiple sites. So we have 2 at the moment. We have our site in Essington, and we have our site in Great Hallingbury in London. We will.
Is that near Essex?
Yes, yeah, it's not far. By the M11. So we will open up to around 15 cemeteries over the next 3 to 5 years. And obviously we'll follow the programme that we're following at Essington and Great Hallingbury to be able to deliver to the local community.
Essington is the module,
Yes. Yeah.
and all the other cemeteries
We'll follow.
will follow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I can definitely see in 3 to 5 years where you're going with this model, and I would say, you know, it's been a pleasure meeting you
Yeah.
again, and I'm
Yeah,
hoping
thank
to
you for
working
having me.
with you. And
Thank you.
Chris, wonderful to
Yeah.
see you again.
And you.
We are interviewing Adam Fisher, who is part of the Essington Cemetery Product Skills knowledge, who knows all the knowledge of the cemetery. Adam, could you tell us, if someone was to come to you and ask you about burial and ashes, how do you go about explaining to them if they have some relatives that they would like to move from one place to Essington?
Right. Well, that's something that can be done. Interestingly enough, there's a lady who lives quite close to Essington Cemetery, and her father is already buried in another cemetery in the West Midlands. It's in Willenhall, and there is limited space available at Willenhall, but she would like to be buried in the same cemetery as her father, like many people would like to do. So she's inquired with Wolverhampton Council, but unfortunately they've said no, because they will not allow people to purchase burials before the time of need, before somebody passes away.
So is that their main reason for saying no?
It is their main reason for saying no, because what they want to do is try and protect the burial space that they've got left for the residents of Wolverhampton. So what this lady has done is she's inquired at Essington, and we've said yes, you can buy burial plots at Essington on a pre-need basis. That is to buy it today for future use, but hopefully for not for a long time. She's looking to buy a number of plots at Essington, which will be together, and it's for herself and her family. And she is applying to the Home Office through an application form which would allow her father to be removed from the existing cemetery at Willenhall and buried at Essington, so that going forward, her father, herself, and her future generation, her children, and the next generation of her family can be laid to rest in the same place. When you're looking to purchase a burial plot from a council, let's not just pick on Wolverhampton, but a council, a lot of councils will not allow you to buy the plot prior to need. Some will, and some cemeteries will, where there's enough space left. But in the main, it's quite common for the council to say, no, you can only purchase a plot when somebody's passed away. Now, with all plots, and this is slightly technical, but what happens with a plot is you are actually purchasing what's known as the exclusive right of burial. Okay, and that has a term period which ranges normally from anything from as low as 25 years to 99 years. Okay, so that is the period for which that you will own that particular plot. Now, if you were able to buy a plot from the council and you were able to buy it on what you call a pre-purchase basis, so you buy it today and then let's say you pass away in 20 years time, okay, and the term of that lease is 50 years in total, you've lost 20 years before you're even buried.
Correct.
So what that means, you have to pay more, your family will have to pay more in 50 or even 30 years time.
So are you saying with Essington you do not have to do that?
No, with Essington it's very, very different, and in fact is unique in the UK, in the fact that when you buy a plot at Essington Cemetery and you're buying it for future use, and to say hopefully you'll live for another 20, 30, 40 years, the term of the exclusive right to burial does not start until you pass away and the funeral takes place. So effectively, you live for 30 years after buying a plot, you've not taken 30 years off your 99-year term.
I think that's a great advantage.
And it's a great advantage for people who want to plan ahead, because if you want to plan ahead but you buy a plot and you've lost so many years, you're losing out. We don't want people to lose out. We want people to be have peace of mind and not lose out by buying a plan. So that lady who's in her 30s and should live hopefully till she's 80 or 90, you're talking about potentially 60 years. In 60 years' time, only then will her term start. If she bought a council plot and it was 50 years, she'd have to pay again, even before she's buried.
The cost would be huge as well.
The other key difference is we're aware that there's concerns within the industry about the cost of a funeral. The cost of a funeral in the UK have gone up and up and up. And buying a burial plot is, it's not a cheap thing product to purchase, but for many people, they know they want to be buried, or for religious reasons, they have to be buried. So that's a cost that they're going to incur. But in, let's say, Wolverhampton and Walsall, the surrounding areas around Essington, it will cost you over £2,000 to buy a burial plot. So that's £2,000 out of your savings. With Essington, we know that people don't necessarily have £2,000 in the bank account, or maybe they do, but they only want to keep that money. So what we've done is allow people to pay on a monthly payment plan to make it easier for people to pay for, budget for, and it makes burial plots more affordable for more people. And again, that's something that no council in the UK will offer.
So Essington has quite a lot of advantages
Yes.
over the council.
Yes.
I can see it's a private cemetery. It has what you've outlined. And in terms of buying multiple plots, how
Yeah.
do you see people or any company buying multiple plots and reassigning them?
The reality is, if somebody is looking to purchase multiple plots, and it can be an individual who's looking to buy plots for themselves and their family. The beauty is that, again, unlike a council cemetery, with Essington Cemetery, they'll be able to choose their individual plots and know that those plots are reserved for them. So whenever they pass, so it does mean that families can be laid to rest together. But it also means with Essington Cemetery, and yes, we are a privately owned cemetery, but it does mean you can purchase a plot today for future use. But if in 20 years' time you've not passed away and your circumstances have changed, then actually you can sell that plot on.
So you can reassign it to someone?
Yes, you can reassign it or sell it to somebody else. And we know that the cost of a burial plot is continuing to grow, continuing to rise. When you sell the plot, there's a good chance in 5, 10, 15 years' time, you may be able to sell that plot for more than you purchased it for.
And looking at, because a lot of people is into mausoleum and things like that, do you expect to have those things within the Essington? Yes.
So what we're having is we're definitely going to have what's called columbarium. So at Essington Cemetery, we have got full lawn burial plots. We've got lawn plots for the burial of ashes, so cremated remains. And we've also got columbarium, which is for the interment of ashes above ground. So that's a large stone structure which allows for ashes, because some people don't like the thought of being buried underground.
I think the West Indian community from recent few years, they seems to want to bury in a mausoleum. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
And yes, and we have certainly got plans to erect mausoleum or mausolea at Essington Cemetery, because it's about 26 acre site, so it's a large enough site to actually cater for above ground burial, which is columbarium for ashes and mausoleum for full burial. So yes, what we're looking to do is, because we've got a dedicated area for the West Indian community, what we're looking to do is effectively engage with that community to make sure that it meets their needs, because different ethnicities and different communities require different things.
Yes, they do.
And that's what we can do at Essington Cemetery, is cater for those needs and effectively offer them an element of customisation within that area, which is true to that community. So the West Indian section will be something that is embraced by that community and will feel like it's part of their community.
I don't think I've ever heard of anyone offering that service before. So I think it's a very good niche to have.
And this is where, because Essington is a private cemetery, we can be flexible and we will cater for the needs of what people want. And we've been talking to people in the West Midlands area, and there is definitely a need and an appetite and a demand for having a dedicated section, so we're going to provide one.
Well, Adam, thank you very much for your product knowledge. You do have in depth of it. It's a pleasure having you.
You're welcome, Robert.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Rick. Yeah, nice meeting you. I know you're a specialist in the area of compliance and procedures. Could you tell us a little bit about the bereavement service that you've been in and for how long, and the various things that comes with it, the advantages and disadvantages?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, my history within the bereavement services sector goes back to 1977 when I first started, in a very sort of minor role as a gardener and a cremator operator. But I worked my way through the sort of structure, if you like, within Birmingham City Council. Ended up as but moved on to being a manager, and then a registrar within the city, and ultimately for the last 10 years of my employment with the City Council as their Principal Cemeteries and Crematoria Officer, which was basically with responsibility for excuse me, all of the cemeteries and crematoria that were being operated within the city by the City Council. That's 11 cemeteries and 3 crematoria, carrying out somewhere in the region of about between 6,000 and 7,000 disposals of deceased people each year, which was quite a challenge.
Yeah.
That went on until 2009, where there was an opportunity for me at that point to take on a very different role, which was as Secretary and Executive Officer with the Federation of Burial and Cremation Authorities. Now, the FBCA takes care of...
What is the FBCA?
It's the Federation of Burial and Cremation Authorities. And it represents the owners and operators of cemeteries and crematoria, whether that's local authority or privately owned burial and cremation facilities, and works an awful lot with government departments around legislation and possible changes in legislation, very much on sort of working groups. There was quite a major upheaval in Scotland going back 3 or 4 years ago, and there was an inquiry that was chaired by Lord Bonamy, who's a High Court judge, and I was asked to sit on that working group with Lord Bonamy, which was
quite an experience.
Quite challenging, quite an experience and very challenging, yeah. It's been a progression in Scotland. Initially, yes, there were some immediate changes made, but what they did was to actually put through a new act, which enabled them to then draw up new regulations, both for burial and cremation, and that's still ongoing at the moment. The new cremation regulations actually come into force on the 4th of April, I think it is. And they're not significantly different to those that are in place in England and Wales, but there are some differences which have resulted from the problems that they had up there.
I can see when someone acquires a fair bit of land like Essington and wants to build a cemetery, there must be a lot of regulations and legislation that they have.
Yeah. I mean,
can you tell us?
Yeah, sorry. The principal things, obviously, the planning permission has to be sought to obviously to open a cemetery, to operate a cemetery, but there are also quite significant requirements in relation to the Environment Agency and the water table probably below the cemetery, and whether there will be any contamination from the burials that take place within the cemetery. So it's a very complicated and lengthy process actually to get approval.
It must be.
It is.
People,
yeah.
I would imagine that
Yeah.
neighbours that living in close proximity, when they hear about something like that, they'll be up in arms about it. You must have some sort of experiences with those things.
Probably not quite so much, strangely enough, with a cemetery as to a crematorium. I think it's one of those things where it's a facility that everybody needs, but they don't want it in their back garden, you know, which, you know, is a fact, unfortunately.
So they're up in arms about the crematorium rather than the cemetery?
Tend to be, yeah, because they think that I think they think they worry about emissions and all sorts of things from crematoria, although those are extremely well controlled these days. It's very different now to how it was probably 20 years ago. And the restrictions and regulations that are in place around that are incredibly tight, and tests that have to take place on a regular basis to ensure that the emissions that are coming from crematoria meet the regulations. So it's very different these days.
I can imagine the length of service that you've given in so many different fields. You must have seen some horrendous things in terms of burial or crematoria. I mean, can you think of any which you can pull out of the hat?
Not horrendous things as such. I mean, obviously, certainly the areas that I've worked in, you know, have been extremely tightly controlled. The thing is, whether it's a burial service or whether it's cremation or whatever else, then it's highly regulated and very well managed under normal circumstances. I think, you know, the only thing is that I think, particularly under local authority control, the regulations tend to be very solid, very immovable, if you like, you know, and there are occasions when, for whatever reason, you know, that can create difficulties for families and for certain religious groups.
So when you, with all the experiences you had, when you come on board with Essington, you obviously, what do you see that you come on board that would be advantageous with Essington to the other local council?
Well, yes, yeah. I mean, the pre-sales, obviously, because there are an awful lot of funeral directors that are selling funeral plans, if you like, but there's not necessarily, particularly on the burial side, something to go with that. So, I mean, you may well have a funeral plan with the funeral directors, but that doesn't mean that you've got an area identified where a burial could take place. If the local cemeteries are at capacity or full or being closed down, then it may be very difficult to actually satisfy the needs of the family, and to allow burial to take place in a reasonable proximity to where they live. You know, I think what really struck me, I think, when I first became involved with Essington was the fact that clearly the company is looking to provide a very high class service to its users. They're looking at trying to satisfy as many of different nationalities or religions as they possibly can. The important thing is, and clearly what is happening, is that, you know, that there are discussions taking place with the different communities to identify their needs, and those are being listened to and addressed, and that's the important thing. And I think that's where this will work for them. You know, whereas perhaps with you know, I'm not trying to be critical of local authority, but it can be very difficult to change the mould, if you like. You know, that once it's set, it's set. And really what is good for one has to be good for another. We're not a great community for talking about death before we have to.
No.
You know, and I think that's the thing, you know. And really, when something dreadful like that happens, then you have to make your decisions very, very quickly. And obviously working closely with the funeral directors in the area as well, to make sure that they're fully aware of the facilities that are available at Essington.
But I think, on the contrary, the West Indian community plan ahead.
Yes, I'm
I
sure.
don't know if you're aware of that.
Yes, I am. Yeah.
You know, they really go all out for things like that. So that's a very good niche.
That's good.
Area, you know.
That's not the case with all sectors of the community, though.
No,
you know,
it's
quite unusual in some
People
areas.
don't plan for those things.
They don't want to talk about it
No,
in a lot of
exactly.
areas, you know. But
None of us is going to come out alive.
that's the thing.
So this discussion is worth talking about.
Quite right. Yeah, absolutely.
I
Yeah.
think we've covered everything. Rick, very much. Rick.
Okay,
It's a
my pleasure.
coming.
My pleasure.